I had planned to make this video about 6 months ago when I left my job at Microsoft after 11 years. Within that first week, I actually had like a whole draft written up in this notebook about the points I wanted to cover, my feelings at the time, kind of like where I was at mentally and just like all my grievances. And it was like a lot of things like, my disagreements about their AI policies, kind of where I thought management was taking the company, like day-to-day stuff regarding like engineering practices and just like a lot of very specific like day-to-day tech job issues, and kind of like how I would lead differently and how would I be like just a better leader and what I wanted next in my career in tech. And it's just like not the type of message I want to convey today and not the type of person that I am today. So I'm glad I didn't post that video. At the time I didn't post it just because these videos are very like emotionally draining to do, and I had just left my job. I wanted to take some time to breathe, and I didn't want to like sit in front of a camera for, I don't know, 20 minutes kind of pouring out my feelings and thoughts about this big life choice I made. But it's been 6 months now. I'm very glad that I have this kind of snapshot of who I was at the time I left my job, just because it's nice to have perspective, because I'm not sure otherwise I would have had this kind of reference point for like my perspective, my thought processes, and who I was as a person at this time. And I mean, of course, this video that I'm making now is going to serve as like a reference point for me in the future about kind of my thought processes in this moment. So yeah, here's the video. I left my job at Microsoft. My last kind of like W-2 income was around $350K a year, which is insane. I grew up not even really knowing people that made six figures, and the idea of even making like six figures was kind of like this far off dream that was just like not in the realm of possibility. So the fact that I was like making this much at this point in my career is honestly still not something I can really wrap my head around. And I'm very appreciative for like the financial position I'm in right now, where I can kind of have this freedom to quit and take some time to reevaluate my life and what I want to do. And I recognize that this is not something most people can do. But at the same time, it's much more money than I needed. I'm a single guy in my 30s. I bought my house a few years ago. Thankfully, I got like a really good mortgage interest rate on this, and like I'm living well within my means. I don't carry debt. I have like a lease on a car payment, which is gonna be done in the next few months, and I have a paid off truck. So besides kind of like mortgages, I don't really have a whole lot of debt. So I have quite a bit of freedom to do what I want. And I very much advise people to live well below your means, just so you can have this freedom to leave and not feel trapped in a job that you don't like. But yeah, anyway, so a bit of context. I went to Microsoft straight out of college. I was an intern as a software engineer in test. That was like a thing before there was like specific software engineers that just focused on testing. Not so much a thing in tech anymore. And I joined as like a full-time software engineer in test. That role got eliminated within, I don't know, the first year at Microsoft. And when I say that role got eliminated, I mean like they got rid of software engineers in test, and I just got rolled into a regular software engineer role. And I've been there since, so it's been about 10 years since then. My entire career there was about 11 years. But I pretty much went there straight out of college. I had other internships and other kind of like jobs during college, but this is like my only like adult career type job I've ever had. So all my perspective and everything has been within big tech, specifically within Microsoft. Pretty much my entire friend group over my time at Microsoft were like my Microsoft friends, their spouses, girlfriends who also worked in tech. So it's just a big group of people: Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, Meta, whatever. I'm just like very much in this like little tech bubble once I moved up here to Seattle from Los Angeles, where I grew up. So like all my thought process, everything like that, were very skewed by being in tech. And I didn't really realize it that much because I didn't grow up in this type of environment. So I just had this idea that I wasn't really living in this tech bubble because I didn't grow up in it, and I've just been working in it for a few years. But it very much did shape the way I think about the world and everything, and I wasn't really aware of it until I had quit my job in April and kind of had a few months out of it. When I left in April, I had like this playbook, because I've had like little startup ideas over the years that I've worked on kind of like after work and just whenever I had time while still working at Microsoft. But I already had an idea kind of like how I would spin up a startup. I went through the whole process of like setting up a bank account, having like some money set aside for this, having like a pitch deck, having wireframes, engineering plans, like actually writing up like MVPs. Like I know the whole process because I've done it before. At the time, my mind was still completely wrapped up in the idea of like pursuing tech-related ventures, software engineering things, coding things, but I had this idea that I have all this time and I could just like run wild with all these experiments and kind of like see what sticks. But everything was still very much in the bubble of like tech stuff. The issue I faced was now that I had all this time and everything, I still couldn't like force myself to enter my office at home. I had worked there the last 5 years since COVID, since I've been work from home since then. And it was no problem. I would make my coffee every morning, go up there, sit in like my little office, and it was kind of a comforting space, honestly. But as soon as I quit my job, it's like this area that I spent so much of my life was like a cave. I didn't want to like enter it, and I haven't really entered my office in the past 6 months because it just like feels like an oppressive, really depressing place. So what I ended up doing was just like not working there. So I'm trying to pursue these like tech-related ideas. From coffee shops. I'm like sitting on my couch working on my laptop, just anywhere to avoid kind of being in my office. And I assume it was just because I had like this mental block that I just wanted to take some time away from. Maybe I associated that with like Microsoft and the job I just left. But I realized kind of like in hindsight that it wasn't just like Microsoft. That whole thing kind of represented like tech and software, and just I didn't want to be doing that right now in that moment. I mean, still to this day, I don't know if that's like exactly what I want. And I don't want to really go back to that life I had at that point when I quit Microsoft. But even though I was working from coffee shops and doing all these other things and working on my little side ventures at the time, it was still like a very much unenjoyable experience. I was able to like force myself through it and able to do it, but I was not enjoying it at all, which was odd because I had pursued these like startup ideas in the past, and it's like always kind of comes naturally, and I have this like energy and this motivation and kind of excitement about building something new and just kind of building something from scratch that I owned the vision for completely. So this was like a very odd experience that I was having. And I'm not like a lazy person at all. I'm not someone that just kind of wants to sit around and not do anything. So it wasn't necessarily that I just wanted to like not work. It was just I couldn't really bring myself to work on those things. So around this time, I had already been volunteering for about a year, just a couple hours here and there for this like downtown association for our town, and their whole mission is to kind of make our downtown a more vibrant place that people want to spend time. And that involves like running events, like business grants to help people improve their storefronts, murals, art stuff, lighting projects. There's a bunch of volunteer opportunities. It's just whatever you can imagine to kind of make people want to go to your downtown and make it a more enjoyable place. That's kind of like what we do. So it's not a big nonprofit. It has like a couple $100,000 budget. Normally has like a few staff members that are actually paid. But besides the staff, for the most part, it's kind of run mostly by volunteers. Like the board members are all volunteers. I was on the board. There's limited resources, so it relies a lot on volunteers and people just giving their time to make this thing work. And I was on the board, and within like a couple weeks of me quitting, this like opportunity came up to like be the board president. And there was a gap there, and somehow I'm not really sure why people trusted me with this, but for whatever reason, the board and everyone, like people in the organization, thought that this is something I could do. And I had the time and the resources, given I wasn't working, to kind of step into this board president role. And the way, if you're not familiar with like nonprofit structures, you have like a board, and they kind of set the direction and the mission. It's like they kind of lead the organization, and then they usually have like a CEO type, executive director type position that reports to them. That executive director is a paid position, and they serve like I mentioned as like the CEO, but they get direction and kind of their vision and everything comes from the board. The problem is the board is like could be a dozen or more people, and it's just not possible to have like a dozen people managing staff, doing day-to-day operations, going to meetings, and all those different things. So you have the board president, which is not really like, they don't have more power than the rest of the board, but they serve as like a figurehead and a representative of the board. So as the board president, I'm pretty much just like a single person that represents the board as a whole. So as the board president, I would have to represent the board to the staff. So that would be kind of like, I serve as the single point of contact. I'm pretty much the manager for our executive director. And I'm the one working with them day to day. I'm the one going to meetings on behalf of the board. I'm the one just serving as if I am the board. But in reality, I don't have any more power. I'm just a representative of these other like 10 people. Sorry, my light died. But at the time, I was like, okay, I'll take this board president role, and it'll give me a bit of a break from the stuff I was doing, so I can maybe catch my breath, kind of have some space, and then I'll come back after a couple of weeks and have this more energy to kind of get back into this, like these little ventures I was doing. And I had this idea that as a board president with this nonprofit, I'd be interacting with a bunch of small businesses. I'd be interacting with like local government, other nonprofits, and I was like, okay, this is a great opportunity for me to kind of like see the type of problems that a small business is facing, or like a local government or a small nonprofit. And I was like, I can see all these problems, and hopefully I'll grab a bunch of like inspiration, and it's like maybe things I can spin into a business or a venture or a startup, or I don't know, something I can sell. So I was still viewing this like board president role, not so much as something I wanted to do necessarily in itself, but it was like, oh, it's a means for me to kind of gather perspective that I can leverage into this like these tech ventures. What really happened is I pretty much just fully ended up diving like headfirst into this role and spending pretty much all my time in this role just being the board president, trying to help the organization. And part of that is because almost as soon as I became board president, we received like a resignation from our previous executive director, which meant we had like no type of paid staff position in that executive director role. And this is like within a couple of weeks of me starting this. I'm fairly inexperienced. I don't have the resources to run this organization. So my first thing to do was like really find someone to fill that executive director role. Thankfully, we had like someone in an assistant operations coordinator type role at the time, which was part-time, who reported to the previous executive director, and they had availability to kind of step into this executive director role in an interim capacity. They didn't have the type of experience to be an executive director at the time, like they didn't come from that background, but they're familiar with the organization, they're well liked, and they had a lot of like passion, and they were a generally very, not were, but they are a generally capable, smart, and like a great individual, even though they just didn't have like the experience at the time. So we put her into this executive director role. I'm new, I don't know what I'm doing. She kind of doesn't really know what she's doing. So at the time, we're just both kind of just treading water, trying to figure out what we're doing. We're trying to close all these grants. We're spending money on the lighting projects, murals, cleanups, events, art walks. There's so much going on, and we're both completely fresh to this type of role. So I'm just there every day for them, almost, just trying to help get the organization stable, and I'm just enjoying it. I'm enjoying the whole process. I'm enjoying the challenges. It's completely unrelated to anything I've ever dealt with in tech. It was almost like a startup type environment, but without any of the tech related startup problems that you're normally facing. You're not trying to come up with like engineering plans and all these other things, and like you're not trying to spin up an AWS account, and you're not trying to decide on like which frameworks you're using, our database system or relational, whatever. You're not drawing diagrams, all these things I'm used to like when you're starting a tech startup, like UX stuff. It's like it's like a startup, but it's not like a tech startup at all. So it's a very enjoyable experience, but at the time I'm still realizing I have no idea how I'm going to tie this back to my career goals as like a tech person, which I was like still very much like I'm a tech person, I'm a software engineer, and that's who I am as a person, and there's no question about it at this time. But I still don't know how I'm going to tie this back to that. Regardless, I'm enjoying it, and I'm just going to not think about it, and since I'm enjoying this and I have the time, like why not just kind of explore this and see what happens. So looking back, this is kind of the first moment where I created some space in my life for something that wasn't like directly tied to my career goals as like a software engineer. Thinking back on that, like I didn't realize the significance of that kind of what seemed like a small choice at the time. But I had never really given myself space since starting my career to do anything that wasn't software engineering related or adjacent. So this is like kind of a big deal, which I didn't realize at the time. And it kind of set me on this path of kind of re-evaluating my entire life and kind of what I wanted and what I was doing and what I actually enjoyed and what I'm even good at and what my identity was as a person. Because I very much tied my self-worth, well, not as a person, I know I have other traits, but my self-worth in terms of my career and profession and money-making ability was very much tied up to software engineering. And that gave me like a lot of anxiety because I'm like, all my eggs are in one basket. It's a very lucrative basket right now, but it might not be forever. There's all this AI stuff, these other things. Things change, and if software engineering ever became not valuable, then I would pretty much not have any value in the sense of like a professional like scope. So that's always bothered me, but most people live like that. Like the vast majority of us are good at something, and if you become very successful, you're generally not like successful at a wide range of careers. You're very successful in your little scope, and that's just like kind of how we operate as a species almost. Is like you have your specialty, sometimes that specialty is really valuable, and if it dries up, you're kind of just screwed. But now I had this space, and now I was like, I'm gonna just explore all these things that might not be directly related to my profession, and I'm doing all these things. Like I'm running payroll, I'm kind of serving as like HR. We have to come up with like employee policies. We have to do everything that's involved with like running an organization, and I have to do fundraising. And I realized like it's kind of fun like going around trying to raise money because like we have to pay the bills. We have to pay the staff, and at the end of the day, that kind of falls on me as like the buck stops with me as the board president, and it's really stressful. I'm like the idea that if I don't do my job well enough, and I don't really know what I'm doing at this time, if I don't do it well, like people's livelihood will be impacted. Like we have an executive director, we have staff that rely on an income, and if I can't raise the money, we can't pay them. And there's like times where we're like really running against like the clock to make sure we have money before certain deadlines where fundraising dries up and things like that. But I like the pressure. I'm somewhat able to do it, surprisingly. Like our fundraising has gone relatively well since I joined, especially considering I have no experience with this. So I'm learning like, okay, I can do things that I didn't really realize I could do before. Like fundraising, it's almost like sales. I'm trying to sell these businesses and other donors on kind of like nothing tangible. They're not going to get a product or a service or anything like that, but I'm kind of just selling them goodwill, and kind of like good feelings. Like you support an organization, you can kind of get some goodwill, feel good about yourself, but it's not easy trying to sell something that's not tangible, especially with someone that has no sales experience. Anyways, that's a long way of me saying like I'm doing all these things, and I'm kind of learning like, hey, I can actually do some other things besides just like writing code. And I'm interacting with all these different people and organizations, and I'm realizing like how different I don't want to say the real world, but the world outside tech is than tech itself. It's literally a completely different world. You're interacting with different people, have different skill sets. You end up in this idea that's like people in tech are like the smartest people ever, and I don't want to say they're not. They are extremely intelligent. I've worked with like some of the most intelligent people I've met in my life while working in tech. But it's a very different type of intelligence, and it's a very kind of just different type of person you interact with. And now I meet all these people, like highly skilled individuals that I just like never would have even, I just didn't realize how much work goes into just the simplest things and running kind of like just basic organizations and all these different skill sets and personalities and things. And it's, the whole thing is kind of blowing my mind. It's getting me out of this like bubble that I didn't really even realize I was in. And it has me now like starting to question like what I even want from a career and what I am even good at and what kind of value I can bring to the world as a whole. So like meanwhile, while I'm doing this whole like downtown volunteer thing, I started doing like other volunteer work and start working with other nonprofits. And at the time, during the middle of the summer, I did some training and I joined this nonprofit that works for, they work with the Forest Service to staff fire lookouts. And if you're not familiar with fire lookouts, it's like those kind of buildings they have on top of mountains or on top of like large man-made structures. And someone used to sit up there for like 3 months of the year during the summer. And just for those 3 months, they were just up there alone and they would just look out for fires. And then once they spotted a fire, they would call it into the fire service or the Forest Service to make sure those fires were put out. So now, for the most part, a lot of those buildings are gone. There's still a few that are staffed like they were in the past, but for the most part, they're just kind of historical structures. And when they are staffed, they're staffed to like volunteers. So I joined this organization where they pretty much work with the Forest Service to make sure the buildings are maintained. They're still open to the public, and they're still staffed. It's not for 3 months anymore. They send volunteers up there for like 2 to 4 days at a time. And I was one of those volunteers. So throughout the summer, I was like up in fire lookouts for 2-3 days at a time. And I thought when I originally volunteered, I'm like, oh, this will be a nice isolating experience out in nature outside of Mount Rainier. And I'll be by myself. I can read, write, and just kind of like enjoy nature in peace. It was not like that at all. The lookouts I staffed were extremely busy, especially on the weekends. You have like hundreds of hikers hiking up to these lookouts it's pretty much like nonstop. Even through the night, people are coming up to do stargazing, to look at the moon, to like watch the sunset, watch the sunrise. It's almost around the clock, especially near like holiday weekends when I was like up there volunteering. And it's not a relaxing experience at all. It's not what I pictured in my head. But what I found is, even though I'm like barely getting any sleep, because you don't get much sleep in these lookouts just because the beds are not comfortable and the sun is up at 5 a.m. and you can't close the windows, so it's super bright in there very, very early. But regardless, even though you're extremely tired, kind of dirty, you smell because there's no baths, things like that. It's not super comfortable, but given all that, and you have no rest because there's people coming up to the lookout all day long, and you're dealing with volunteers from like pretty much 8 to 8, so like 12 hours a day, with a few breaks, and I have to make sure the lookout's available to the public. So all day long, people are coming in, I'm talking to them, I'm pointing out mountain peaks, I'm showing them maps because they have questions about trails, they're asking questions about the plants. I don't really know anything because I just started volunteer, but I'm like kind of winging it. Sorry, the camera ran out of memory card space. I didn't realize how long I was talking, but it was also kind of dark, so I brightened it up a bit. Going back to the fire lookout, what I'm realizing is, even though I don't know what I'm doing, I'm exhausted, tired, dirty. I don't really know what I'm doing. With all that considered, I'm having a better and more rewarding time up there than I have on any day in the past 10 years at this kind of in the software engineering role, where I had like spent all this time investment and just like putting all my labor into this and effort into like perfecting the skill. And I'm a very good software engineer, not trying to brag, but I do believe highly in my capability there. Even with all that, I'm like enjoying this random thing I'm doing on a mountain where I'm not even getting paid. And I'm getting a much more rewarding experience out of it than this thing I spent 10 years devoting my life to at this point. My life at this point, I'm volunteering at these different organizations. I'm not making any money. I'm just doing it because I want to do it. And they're very challenging. Like a lot of these days are much more challenging than what I faced in my tech job. At the end of the day, I worked from home. I was good at what I did. I was very confident in my ability to do my job at Microsoft. And I was compensated well, and I was working long hours sometimes, but I knew what to do. And what I'm doing now is I don't know what I'm to do. I don't know how to fundraise money. I am worried about like trying to make payroll. I'm very stressed, if I'm being completely honest, because I don't know what I'm doing at all in these roles, and there's like people depending on me, and we don't have like a multi-billion-dollar budget and all these revenue streams and all this money coming at us like you do when you're in tech. It's very resource constrained compared to what I'm used to, and regardless, with all the stress and being lost and everything else, it's a much more rewarding experience. All this is much more rewarding than what I've spent my life doing up to this point. And I'm not going to go deeply into this kind of tangent, but when I created this space, I didn't realize it was going to seep into other parts of my life. Like I started creating space for these type of like friendships and even like romantic relationships and other stuff like I would have never like been really open to before. But at whatever point, like my whole idea of life at this point is very much different than where it was in tech, and I have this whole idea about creating space and being open to new things and exploring just things in the moment instead of trying to figure out how it fits with this like grander like plan that I have for my life. And I'm like making these friends and having these experiences that are kind of like much deeper and much more meaningful than like I've been used to. Not that I have a ton of meaningful friendships, but throughout my life, but these are just new and it's different, and it's giving me a different perspective and idea about what I want in just any type of personal relationship, from friendship to family, romantic, and pretty much like my foundational thing is all being challenged here, from my career to my personal life, everything, just because I decided to make some space in my life for things other than what I had considered to be my path up to this point. So now here I am. It's like 6 months since I quit my job. I don't really know what to do from here. I know I'm extremely stressed, I'm tired, and I need some time to process kind of like these learnings, these experiences that I've had over the 6 months. And I'm glad I'm making this video now because it's a nice kind of like moment to capture of my life before I kind of like take these next steps to process what has happened. Because this is not sustainable. I'm very, like I said, I'm tired. I don't have a ton of energy. I don't have like, I can't live kind of this life where I'm like this stressed all the time. I'm very much enjoying it. It's like in some of the best times of my life, but I recognize it's like not sustainable. And at some point I actually need a job. I can't just live working for free for the rest of my life. So I decided to make this video today. This is like where I am now. I'm not the person I was 6 months ago when I originally planned to make this video when I quit my job. And I'm not necessarily done with like tech or software engineering. I just want to think more deeply about how I can bring value outside of just purely coding. Maybe I'm still a software engineer, I work in that type of role. And I would think I would like to go back to that, but I want to do more. Alexa, stop. But I just want to be able to deliver more value than just like this little narrow scope that I thought was my purpose and where I derived my self-worth from in the past. Well, I don't know where to go from here. And I know I don't want to go back to the life I had before. But I'm glad I've had this time to kind of learn. And we'll see what's next. But this is kind of the end of the video. Maybe you'll see another video from me in a few months and I kind of have a little bit more idea of like what actually came from these like realizations that I had. So stay tuned, maybe subscribe. I'm going to be making a lot more videos in the next few months anyways, just because I enjoy this and I haven't done this in a while, just because I've been so busy with other things. But I very much want to get back into my normal life a bit, kind of get my old hobbies back and just kind of find some kind of stability and grounding and just take what I've learned and process everything. So I hope, I don't know, hopefully there's something here for any like people watching this video. I know I'm kind of like all over the place. But I don't know, hopefully maybe this gives you some insight into maybe your career choices or anything like that. But yeah, I'll see you on the other side.